Okay, mashallah, this is now house is open because this is the academic discussion. There is no debate. We try to understand each other, but we have to be honest and the genuine. We don't try to conceal anything, whatever we believe. This is the opportunity, I must say, the great opportunity to understand each other's views genuinely, what we cannot understand from the so-called debates or so many books, right? Okay, that's up to you.
Can I start off? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, if that's okay, a series of questions. Thank you, both of our respected scholars. Thank you so much. I just want to ask a few things of Dr. Bahman. And the reason for asking is to say that actually there is far more in common with the understanding of the Sunnah than there is of difference. In fact, I think from what was mentioned, the sort of meta-Sunnah principle that you're talking about, from there we can begin to see that actually, no, it's not that different. Now, I'm picking out 2 or 3 things that you stated. Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi said, whatever is faced by the Ummah till the day of Qiyamah, he will be found within the book and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a statement that the Shias agree is a perfectly fine statement. Now, hadith upon hadith upon hadith, when we look at Baqir, Sadiq, Salamullah alayhim, they would say, the Prophet did this. Yes? All this, we heard that the Prophet did this. And we have their chains of narrations as well. At times, we find Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi doing his own ijtihad. For example, when people asked him about the marine animals, what was consumable, what wasn't consumable, he would say, in the book of Allah, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ. So he said, you can drink, you can eat everything from the sea, but he said, yes, but Ali Salamullah alayhi was insistent upon the scaleless fish not to be consumed. He would say things like that. Again, that's one argument, that the Imams have always stated that it's in the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet. And the authority on which they stated was always from, like for example, the whole issue of La Darar wa La Dirar fil Islam. Imam Baqir roots it into the Prophet. Similarly, Imam Sadiq roots it back to Ali ibn Abi Talib or back to the Prophet on many occasions or within the book. Now, on the other hand, and then I want to come back with other questions afterwards, and I don't want to bore everybody. Yes. And on the other hand, you have the hadith of the Qurbani, in which Imam Sadiq said that my grandfathers, the Prophet and Ali ibn Abi Talib, saw this, and I'm seeing this because of this and this and this. And I want to pick on that point. You stated that the words are vehicles to the Sunnah. They are not Sunnah, according to the Shia jurisprudence. The words are means to the Sunnah, but they are not Sunnah as such. Now, so here the people ask Imam Sadiq in Mina, again it's a Sahih Hadith, that you are allowing us to take the meat out of Mina, whereas your grandfather, the Prophet, used to be insistent that the meat cannot leave Mina, the Qurbani meat. Imam Sadiq's response there was that in the time of my grandfather, the Hujjaj were poor. And there was a need for that meat to be consumed within Mina. Now the community is more affluent. So the meat can legitimately be taken out of Mina because the Mina community is being fed adequately. What I'm trying to say here is that if we understand Sunnah in this way, that the words are mere vehicles, then we will find that the Sunnah of the Sahaba, given all the debates about the credibility of Sahaba or not, looking at the statements and looking at the fluctuating statements of the Shia Imams, we have this particular overarching rule, don't we, that refer to the Quran. If it is consistent with the Quran, then take it. And if it conflicts with the Quran, then abandon it. The Prophet said that. Ali ibn Abi Talib has also said that. Ibn Hajar has, Radi has quoted it in Al-Balagha. Yes? That whatever conflicts with the Quran, throw it away. I'm saying, with those 2 principles, don't we find a lot of conformity between the Sunni school of thought and the Shia school of thought with regards to Sunnah? Because the basic principle is, let it not conflict with the Quran. And 2, that the Ahlul Bayt, they themselves were a source in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Sorry, I just wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned this, thank you for raising it. I mentioned that despite the difference in our path to Sunnah, despite the difference, the path, I mean, one goes through a chain of transmission to companions, the other goes chain of transmission to Ahlul Bayt, okay? However, we see the convergence. We see that both methods are working, you see, and are converging to each other, especially in matters of faith and practice, because that was what everyone was seeing. Now, what I said about words being the vehicle to Sunnah, because of course, you cannot say this hadith is Sunnah. This hadith reveals the Sunnah for us. This hadith implies or indicates that this was the Sunnah of the Prophet. The hadith itself is not Sunnah. It's an indication of the Sunnah of the Prophet, certainly. And therefore, whatever we say is our struggle to reach to the refined and accurate Sunnah of the Prophet. This is what we do. Now, Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, of course, if we have another opportunity to talk about the institution of Ahlul Bayt, as Dr. mentioned, you see, whatever they say and they do is based on the knowledge they have received from the Prophet, not in an ordinary way, in a sort of different way. آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. This is how they are
It's a
taught.
theological position.
It's a theological position, yes. Okay.
However, within the jurisprudential method,
Now, within jurisprudential method, when a Shia asks Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq about a ruling, he doesn't say, okay, what is your chain to the Prophet? He doesn't say, he says, the Prophet said this. The Prophet did this. How do you know? I know. I know as a source. Okay?
that's right, but they're rooting it into the Prophet.
Everything,
Or the Quran.
everything that the Aimma say is just illumination of what the Prophet did. As
So then in that case,
yes.
what the Sunni school of thought is saying, that the companion's worth is due to this relation to the Prophet and conveying from the Prophet. In that, isn't that exactly the same as what the Shia school of thought in
No,
jurisprudence is
because
saying?
if for example Sa'id ibn Musayyib, who's a Tabi'i, reports something from the Prophet without saying where he brought it from, where did you hear? For example, say for example Sha'bi, okay, is the greatest scholar, I mean, the master, the Imam of Hadith. If he says Prophet said, okay, we say, okay, where is your chain? How did you know? Where do you hear it from? He says, yes, I heard from, for example, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, or I heard from such and such, I heard from Hassan al-Basri, for example, he heard it from Khudri and then from the Prophet. That is what we ask, and that's what we demand. But when it comes to Ja'far al-Sadiq, we're not asking,
But
what
it's
is your
implied-
chain?
But it's implied that
No, no,
there is
no, no.
some.
There's no implication that there's a chain.
No, there's implication that the
Is it-
rooting is within the
There's an
Prophet.
implication that he knows the Sunnah of the Prophet. It's not that it's his Sunnah.
That's right.
There's an implication that he knows the Sunnah of the Prophet in one way or another.
So that's just methodological difference, but the Sunnah is what the Prophet has given and what is in the Quran.
Absolutely. There is no Sunnah but the Sunnah of the Prophet.
So the method might be a bit different, but it's the same thing. Now, I want to pick on one more thing. Do I have time? I'm thinking of it. Shall I?
You know, you say the method is different, we are trying to reach at the same thing. This is what I tried to say at the beginning.
That is right.
There's one thing, and we are trying to reach that one thing, which is Sunnah of the Prophet, through different methods.
So now, one more thing. You commented that the Sunnah have books that they call Sahih. However, many Sunni scholars have been very critical of the content of Bukhari and Muslim,
Yes.
and of each other as well.
Yes.
And of course, there are many debates on the methodology of Bukhari and Muslim. People say Muslim was far more meticulous than Bukhari. For example, the researches that are coming out. So I think this is a misconception that Shia have, that the Sunnis believe that everything in Bukhari and Muslim is Sahih. But a similar misconception is within the Shia as well. The Akhbari school of thought was of the opinion that since Kulayni, Tusi, Sudduq are Udul, whatever they say should not be questioned.
That's why we don't accept Akhbari's position. That's why we don't accept Akhbari's position.
So Akhbari within the Shia, sorry Sheikh, the Akhbari within the Shia also say that the four canonical books are Sahih. So I'm just saying the same thing that we have in the Sunni is within the Shia as well.
Yes, I accept that, but the difference is that the mainstream Sunni believe in the Sihha of Sahih. The mainstream Shia believe that the four books are not Sahih without investigation. So there's a minority in Shia and there's a minority in Sunni.
But the principle is the same. In essence, it's the same.
Well, it's just minority majority.
Common factor.
I just wanted to clarify that. In essence, it's the same.
Shall we move to Dr. Khurram this week? And then Shuyukh, and after Dr. Khurram.
Thank you very much for both the scholars. I just expecting from Dr. Saeed to enlighten us about Shia position. But I think 90% of his submission was criticism of Sunni position. Rather than we like to see what are the roots of Sunni, why they exclude, although I know there is a topic afterwards, it's a institution of Ahlul Bayt, why they exclude Prophet's wives. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she has over 2,000 hadiths, and the Quranic verse about Ahlul Bayt directed to the Sound Nabi. These are the major basic questions. So rather than highlighting any of those questions, he just 90% of time he consumed on criticism of Ahlul Sunnah. The right way of academic discussion, present your case first. You failed to present your own case, and all your time was criticism of Sahaba and trying to depict them in a very, very bleak manner, which is obviously, it's academic discussion, people tolerate, but obviously it is not to be tolerated in general public. So what I suggest, that the crucial questions, why you exclude Prophet's wives from Ahlul Bayt, why, what is, as our brother said here about the chain, when you say, okay, there was 400 books and nothing left, about only 16. Our Sunni scholar, he has said that there was 48 compilation, and Sheikh Mahmoud Ahmad Ghazi, the great scholar, he even mentioned 250. So the claim is both sides, because you haven't got proof except for 16 out of whatever you say, 4,000 or 16,000, whatever number you make it. But the counter claims are always there. And the Prophet ﷺ, I'm not going in popular discussions about Sahaba and etc., but confining to our subject, you haven't mentioned even the names of Shia collections and how they were collected and what are their backgrounds. So we like to get some benefit out of this session, that what are the Shia main sources, but rather than whole of your submission was a good criticism, very good articulated criticism of Sunni position, rather than presenting your own position, which you failed. Sorry about that.
Actually, I didn't want to criticize Sunni position. I wanted to explain why the Shia do not report hadith from Sahaba. See, that was the main issue. I mentioned several reasons, and then of course I have to come why then we call Ahlul Bayt, and why we have to somehow how we define Ahlul Bayt and how we actually compile hadith from Ahlul Bayt. We have not compiled hadith from Sahaba, okay? That is something very obvious. Now, the reasons I mentioned was, first of all, definition of companion.
Very superficial reason, if I dare to say. Rather than, they are Sahaba, when we say Sahaba who spent whole of their lives with the Prophet ﷺ, you don't accept from them even. Okay, there are Sahaba who just have a bird's eye view of the Prophet ﷺ, but there are hundreds and even thousands of them who spent all of their life with the Prophet, and you don't accept from it, then even.
Not that we don't accept from them. We don't have reliable chains to them. That's what I said. You see, the reasons which I mentioned was, first of all, of course, the definition of companion, then about the integrity of all the companions, which, of course, there is argument between Shia and Sunni in that, and then our chain of transmission to companions. That is what I said was the main issue of contention. You do not accept our rajal of hadith, we do not accept your Rijal of Hadith, very frankly, you see. And this comes to a difficult position, you see. Not that, as I said, hundreds of these companions, thousands of these companions, these were the people who disseminated Islam. I mentioned all these, okay? The
But you
point
don't
is-
accept from
No,
them. This is the
not that we
problem.
don't accept from them. No. Probably I could not explain myself good. Not that we don't accept from them. If we are sure that something comes from them, we accept from them.
You know, Prophet Sallallahu said, "Khudhu nisfa dinakum hadhihi al-Humayra." You know, Humayra mentioned Humayra. But Aisha radiallahu ta'ala.
You see,
Ahlul Bayt,
again-
Quran mentioned,
No, just-
Quran directs Nisa al-Nabi. And you don't accept
I have to stop
Nisa
you
al-Nabi.
there.
But there is a lot of
I have to
conception.
stop you there
Uh-huh.
because we are coming to the main question again. Who said Prophet said that? You see? Who said Prophet said that?
But the Quran says Nisa al-Nabi. Okay, cover the Quran.
No, okay, we come to that. But the point is, when you say Prophet said this, this is the whole issue. That we say, okay, your chain to Prophet is not acceptable to us. Our chain to Prophet is not acceptable to you. Therefore, we have to come to a sort of settlement and agreement. Now, when it comes to the Nisa'ul,
And actually, sorry to interrupt you. Actually, I requested as Sheikh, you as well, because so many things they are related to the position of Sahaba, the topic of Sahaba, and this is the whole topic separately should be dealt with, and the Ahlul Bayt as well, because obviously there are the differences regarding the definition of a Sahabi and Ahlul Bayt as well from the both sides. Just clarification, because I have to take another question from the Sheikh Ayub, then Sheikh Abu Jafar, then Zulfikar. You are next to them. That's clarification, as you mentioned through Ibn Hajar, and this definition that he saw. There is a tashriq, there is a proper explanation from Sunni sources. Just saw from the distance, the Holy Prophet, this is not enough to become a Sahabi. Saw me via the proper meeting, company, benefiting from. And that's Allama ibn Taymiyyah, Allama Shukani, Shah Waliullah. So these
it is
people,
the stance of
that's-
Shia.
You know, the question,
Mm.
okay, you don't accept those who just saw, have a glance on the Prophet. Do you accept from those Ashra Mubashira, or you accept from Badri Sahaba? Do you accept from wives of the Prophet? You don't.
No, you are wrong. You see, again, not that we don't accept from them. We don't have authentic chain to them. You see, this you have to differentiate. Even if
This is an excuse.
Look.
Lame excuse.
Even if
Yes, let's make Sheikh Arif, if I have Sheikh Arif.
Okay,
Sheikh
now,
Ayub.
now
Yeah.
let's look at the Shia books of jurisprudence. They've got narrations upon narrations from the Sahaba, Ridwanullah, in terms of shortening the fast, in terms of where there is no light, there is no night, in terms of prayers, in terms of transactions. When we go into the 50 books, jurisprudence, we'll find narrations upon narrations from Sahaba, without any Shia chain in there, yes? If you go to theology, you will find narrations upon narrations from the Sahaba. In fact, the Shia theology is a halfway point between the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ara. So it benefits from both sides of the Sunni theological sort of schools, and also the narrations come from there. If you look at a compilation recently put together of all the ahadith on morality, like Mizan al-Hikmah, you'll find a great number of ahadith from Lady Aisha. So Sunnis have a misconception about the Shias as well, yes? And this is what we're saying, that the line towards one or the other may be disputed, but in method, in essence, I find both of them are saying the same thing. And we need to overcome this sort of a very, I'm not going to undermine the discussion by saying a very superficial methodological difference, but we have to overcome this difference. But I can show you when we go downstairs, hadith upon hadith from Lady Aisha in morality, and then hadith from the Sahaba.
In secondary sources.
No, in primary sources I'll show it to you, yes?
Okay, let us have a look.
just if I add something, you see, through the Sunni chains, we have many traditions from Ali ibn Abi Talib, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now you say,
He was one of great companions.
do we accept
Ashra
Ali?
Mubashira.
Do we accept Ali ibn Abi Talib? We do not. We do, but we don't accept those traditions. You see, it's not the case that we do not want the Sahabi, or we don't want to listen to Aisha or or for example, Salman or Ali ibn Abi Talib, we say,
Then
these
don't
change-
make the criticism
No.
that you don't accept from Sahaba because they just have a look on the Prophet. Say you don't accept.
Now, Dr. Khurram, just here, when you say criticism, so it means criticism is not negatively. You know, in the meaning of tanqis, obviously, this is something which is not allowed. On the other side, we have to give the right, the other side, whatever they believe, and they have to put forward in a proper way. However, when they say this chain of narration, even through Ali bin Abi Talib, we believe in Ali bin Abi Talib, but on the other side, this chain of narrations we don't believe as reliable. So this is their right, because on the other side, we do so. We done so because if you go through Asma or Rijal, Abu Hatim al-Razi, or Hafiz al-Zahabi, or Hafiz ibn Hajar, and if you go thoroughly, the case is the same. Because the Shia Asma or Rijal, their chains of the narration, most of them not reliable. So we request the Shia scholars as well, they have to, however, retaining your differences with you, but you have to accept that this is the right of the other side in a, dignified at the proper way. This is the way of the academic discussion. Also, we are here to show the true picture to the world community and the Muslim community exclusively. Yeah.
And in addition, Imam Taymiyyah said all of the Shia hadith are concocted and fabricated. Yes? Ibn Taymiyyah said this. Yes, you know this. It's the same attitude there. And then recently people who have come from Azhar and they've been talking about the Adaratul Sahaba and other such things. I'm just trying to look at the commonalities and frank debate that you gave today, both of you, which is very good. So we can come to terms with it. The Sunni school always reports that whatever was from the Shia source or leading back to Ali ibn Abi Talib was somehow barred, and we weren't really told about it openly. So that bias is there as well, and here as well. Yes? So we have to come to terms with it and try and acknowledge and go over it.
Sheikh Ayub.
Naam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, it's a good gathering. May Allah reward all the both speakers. Just maybe to Dr. Khurram. Shia's
You will give me a chance afterwards. He's mentioning my name and he's directing me, but when I say, you will say, oh, he has already
It's
said.
because of your
If he's
contribution.
mentioning me, should have a chance to
No,
present my submission.
That's all right.
Just to mention an example, Shia narrates from the wives of the Holy Prophet. For example, you have hadith from Salama about the tafsir of the ayah, آية التطهير إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Hadith from Salama. So it doesn't mean that Shias do not narrate from the wives of the Holy Prophet. I think Dr. Bahmanpour said clearly the time doesn't allow him to go into all the issues there. I have a question from...
Actually, let me, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I requested him, that wasn't the part of the topic today. That's I stopped Sheikh Abdul Hamid as well, and he excluded so many things from his paper.
May I just this small point?
Yes, carry on, carry on.
My brother Sheikh Abdul Hamid, I want to ask a practical hadith issue. Practical hadith question regarding the hadith, which is, you mentioned the example of Imam Malik where he says about tawatur is a key issue.
Yes.
From his narration and his books. You find today, you go to any Sunni mosque, or majority rather, of Sunni mosques, you could hear the hadith that the Holy Prophet says, I leave behind you amongst you two things, Kitab Allah wa Sunnati. Now, if you go through this hadith and you find the chain of narrators, eventually you will end to Imam Malik. He's the only one who has mentioned the hadith in Muwatta. However, Imam Muslim in Sahih Muslim has mentioned another version of hadith, Kitab Allah wa itrati ahl bayti. So today, practically, wherever we go to the Sunni mosques, we hear this hadith of Al-Muwatta from Imam Malik, which there is no tawatur in there. And even there is no sanad. He says, Balagani, it has come to me. And we know he didn't live at the time of the Holy Prophet. So my question here is something like the saying of the Holy Prophet about Kitab Allah wa Sunnati wa Kitab Allah wa Itrati Ahla Bayti. How did Imam Malik qualify this hadith, which today majority of Sunnah thinks that it is the only hadith which is Sahih, and Kitab Allah wa Sunnati wa Itrati, which is Sahih? You don't hear much about that. Thank you.
First of all, the question is, how do you find the source of Kitab Allah wa Itrati? And Imam Malik, rahimahullah, who is the, of course, he was the time of Tab'in, but he lived in Medina, and he received from this is why I said that the Amul Ahlul Medina for Imam Malik, rahimahullah, that was the Hujjah, because he was receiving, and he said the practice of Ahlul Medina basically is a Hujjah according to him. And this is the hadith that he has narrated in his Muwatta, Imam Malik. I'm not pretty sure, Sheikh may correct me if this hadith is also mentioned in Bukhari as well, I think.
No, it's not. It's
That's
only
not
the
there.
Muwatta Imam.
Muwatta Imam Malik,
Imam Hakim,
Mustadrak al-Hakim.
Okay, because he
Oh,
mentioned.
yes, go ahead.
Sayyid Abu Ala Mawdudi, rahimahullah, he said the greater zulm our Shia brothers they make, excluding the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Ahlul Bayt. However, you will find all those verses are directed in Surah Ahzab to Ahlul Bayt who are the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That means, although we don't exclude Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu and his progeny from Ahlul Bayt, however, one who does not allow one's family from Ahlul Bayt, this is the main question. I think your scheme of these seminars is a bit other way around. It should be first Ahlul Bayt, then we should have resolved who are Ahlul Bayt and who are not. Then we should come to Hadith, the source of Hadith. Second thing which I like to say, that it's not good to pick and choose. You pick a Hadith from Imam Muslim and you don't believe on the rest of it, Pick and choose will not help,
No, I think the
That's
issue
about
is
Quran.
not
That's
that is Quran, but the principle is laid down there, that you pick a Hadith from Imam Muslim, which we all believe Imam Muslim's Hadith. However, this is not the case that you pick one of Hadith of Imam Muslim to just to promote your case, and then you don't.
You see,
This is a popular level thing,
Yes. Because the question is directly to you about.
Only for Quran. It's not for any other book.
Yeah, this is the principle laid down there.
No, but we
Principle laid down there.
No,
We say
no,
Urdu,
let
mitha
me-
mitha hap, kadwa kadwa.
No, let me say that. Dr. Khurram, in the case, for example, one hadith is narrated by Al-Bukhari, the other Al-Muslim. If the other side, if they got any problem, they can put forward their problem to us for solution, and vice versa. Because we got the same problem here. One hadith is from, for example, At-Tahzib, the others from Malla Yahduruhu al-Faqih. Apparently contradicting each other, or there is a confusion. This is our right to put forward. It should not be criticized or objected here. So that's why we are here, both sides, listening each other resolutely, and this is the academic way to understand, without concealing. We have to be honest to ourselves, not concealing.
Dr.
There is no.
Khurram, who can deny that the wives of the Prophet are his Ahlul Bayt and family? Who can deny? Doctor in his presentation said, I don't know if you missed that part, he said, of course, the Azwajul Nabi are the Ahlul Bayt of Nabi.
So how many hadiths in your primary sources
there's-
from these Ahlul part of Ahlul Bayt?
That's fine. I'm not trying to justify Shia or Sunni. I'm just saying, but he's saying they're Ahlul Bayt. And as Abdullah Mawdudi stated that there's two tiers of Ahlul Bayt. I'm just saying, fine, Shias might be wrong, you're not accepting the hadith from the wives of the Prophet, but on that point, the Shias do acknowledge that the wives of the Prophet are Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet.
Can I just mention one thing?
Sheikh's right. Then Sheikh Ayub was in the middle, which is
Sheikh Ayub is actually caught in crossfire. So, my brother, sorry, what's his name? Dr. Khurram. Dr. Khurram.
Persian name, you.
Yeah, Quran. Quran means
Khurram Shah. Khurram Shah in Iran.
You know the Quran, you know,
Khurram.
you always say that all Shia hadiths are fabricated. Okay.
I haven't said that.
I mean, Sunni brothers usually say that without investigating our point of view. You see, now when I bring this, I want to say that why, for example, we do not report, we do not somehow accept these chains because we have difference of opinion about the Rijal. You see, even today, if you see someone saying something, for example, about some major issue, you may say that, yeah, he's a reliable person. I know him. He always comes to our community in Sunni gatherings, and I know him. He's very reliable. I say, look, this man he's a Wahhabi. I don't rely on him. You see, this is difference of opinion. You see, if I say
Same the people can say about Rafidi.
no,
About
you see,
Batini.
I want
You
to say
about
that
Wahhabi,
at
the
that-
same argument can be
no,
presented
you are not
about
getting my
Rafidi.
point, doctor. You are not getting my point. At that time, when these books of hadiths were being compiled, if Imam Bukhari says, I rely on this man, and I do not rely on this, and we know many people were left out because they had Shi'i inclinations, you see? Not because they didn't have integrity of character, not because they were not honest, they were left out because they were Shi'i, okay? Now, if I come and say, Imam Bukhari, with all due respect, you rely on that man, I don't rely on that man. Now, you are telling me that no, you have to rely on that man. You see, there's no question about companions here. The question is, do I rely on my chain to the companion or do I not rely? Now, I say that, no, the same thing that you say about Shia hadith, we don't say about Sunni hadith. Honestly. We never say all Sunni hadith is fabricated. We say that they tried their best, despite 130 years of ban on writing hadith, they tried their best to bring the Sunnah of the Prophet, to make the change to the companion. They tried their best to do it, but still, it's not reliable. This is what we say. Now, you can say you are wrong, that's fine. And you can say that your hadith is completely fabricated. That's fine, okay? The point is that, as I said, despite the differences in method, we are converging in the conclusion about fiqh especially. We are converging in conclusion. Now, the issue of Ahlul Bayt is a different thing. If you want to enter it, of course, that would take a long time. Doctor knows I have several slides about what's the meaning of Ahlul Bayt, the description, and what we mean about it. When we say Ahlul Bayt, we have to have two different types of Ahlul Bayt. Those who were inspired with knowledge, those who were not inspired with knowledge. Not that they were bad, they were not inspired with knowledge. Say, for example, Al-Hasan, Al-Hussein, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, they were brothers, okay? Al-Hasan and Hussein, we say, they were inspired with knowledge. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya was not inspired with knowledge. Zayn al-Abidin and his brothers. Baqir and his brothers. We say Baqir was inspired with knowledge, his brothers were not inspired with knowledge. So that's why we say that there is a definition of those members of Ahlul Bayt who were inspired with knowledge. With all due respect with other members of Ahlul Bayt, of course, that's not denied. So this is how, maybe we have one session about this and we'll discuss.
Yes, that's why we have to agree upon that, because this is wide-ranging topic, the concept of Ahlul Bayt, and this is not so simple. So there are so many things related to Isma, infallibility, Imam Masum, and so many other issues related to it. That's why this time we avoided that. But thank you very much. This is the good definition, because there are the two categories of Ahlul Bayt academically within Shia school of thought. So we have to agree upon that in detail on Ahlul Bayt and also on Sahaba from the other side. We should discuss separately, because here in a short while we cannot do justice for it, because we have already decided and specified these topics for the next time. Just for clarification, Shaykh, from Ahl Sunnah side, when ulama talking about Shia's ahadith are fabricated, this is not the case, the true, in the case of the majority or the generally. When they talk about it, this is not about hadith itself, the text of hadith. mainly this is related to the chains of narrators, not reliable or fabricated. For example, hadith.
We are all talking about the chains, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are all talking
The
about
whole
chains.
discussion is about the chain. This is I have to remove
I think
misunderstanding.
there is a problem with them. They don't
No,
rely upon the
there is no
chain.
problem.
There is a problem.
There are many problems with that, but one problem.
Dr. Khurram, when I say there is no problem, it means we have to accept the right of the other side.
Yes.
And
But
the
they
vice
don't
versa.
believe on the chain.
Listen
They
to-
say it's
yes.
wahbi or ilm ladunni. This
For
is what
example,
we
No,
do.
no, no. Chain is very, very important that we know that something has come out of the mouth of Ja'far al-Sadiq. Okay? So we have a chain of transmission.
From Imam Jafar to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do
He
you
has-
believe the chain or not? This is the question.
No, he has.
this is
He
a
has-
question related to the
he
topic.
has,
Uh-huh.
he has the inspired knowledge about the Sunnah of the Prophet. He doesn't need chain.
This is the problem. Here
No, this is not the
differ.
problem. This is the difference.
Here we differ.
This is
Here
the
we differ.
difference.
Here we
You see,
differ.
this is the difference. That's what I wanted to make clear was this difference. You see that
Ah,
this
yeah.
is the main difference between our hadith and your hadith. That's all.
And this major difference, this is the time we have to understand each other genuinely because there are so many misconceptions. For example, from the both side, if I say, when this side, it has been claimed that Shia's ahadith, this is I think the wrong statement. The case must be relating to the chains of narrators. For example, this hadith is, frequently I can see, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ لَا يُؤْمِنُ أَحَدُكُمْ حَتَّى أَكُونَ Shia sources as well. I myself learned. But the chain of narrators is different. The same hadith is there from Bukhari, Muslim, or Muwatta. The chains of narrators different. Hadith itself is the same. So there is a difference of interpretation regarding one side does not relate the other and vice versa. So that's why we have to accept, what's the principle here? We have to agree with disagree. This is the principle, and still because the root is the same, this is the same. So this is the thing we have to believe.
The analogy given by Imam Malik that he was a Tabi'i, same analogy go to Imam Jafar.
Can I just come in? on
Because
this?
he was not a Sahabi.
Can I-
The same analogy.
Can I-
So
He
if
didn't
you
have
need a
inspired
chain-
knowledge. My
So
brother, Imam Malik
Yes,
did not have inspired knowledge.
This is the
This is what we
difference.
believe.
Yes, Sheikh Arif, yes,
Okay,
listen.
I'll just make one point and come back to this. It's very important you pointed this out.
Yeah.
Sheikh, thank you so much for bringing in your paper that whole issue of Ta'amul Al-Madina
Yes.
and the notion of Tawatur. And I think that's very important, and we do need to understand this further, because the whole understanding within the Shia as well has been that the ijma is tacitly approved by the Prophet or the Imam there. And Ta'amul Ahlul Madina actually signifies this, that if the Ahlul Madina had tawatur, then how would they have tawatur on a religious issue unless the Prophet had already told them that? So it's a very important issue and a basis for us to begin to understand things in a clearer way. I want to come back to you, Dr. Khurram. You legitimately have pointed it out, that if tawatur is tabi, then Imam Sadiq also is a tabi.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate thing. So now here what I'm saying is that the Shia theological point is this, that if Imam Sadiq says that the Prophet has said this, if Imam Sadiq said the Prophet has said this, you don't have to ask why the Prophet has said this, how do you know? I go to Hajj every year, and I'm consumed by looking at the literature of Ahlul Sunnah and Ahlul Shia, both of them, yes? The more I'm awakening, the more I'm seeing that the truth is somewhere else. In any case, I find a hadith in the spiritual literature quoted within the books of Ahlul Sunnah and the Wahhabi, who are the Wahhabi school of thought, who quote Imam Ali ibn Hussein. Yes, that Imam Ali ibn Hussein used to come to Makkah upon his horse, and he used to spiritually state these things. And they don't give any more chains after that. They just said Ali ibn Hussein said this, and they follow it. This is the Wahhabi brothers.
No.
Then you find a hadith from the 5th Imam, yes, about stoning. Wait, I'm coming to finishing my thing. About stoning, yes, at night for Niswan. Yes, and they follow that as well. And it was written on the placards as well that it's from Bakr, Ibn Ali, and so on and so forth. Now, When you look at the jurisprudence of the Shia, and we can look at the Hadith of Hajj, you will find the Hadith of Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq, Salamullah alayhima, both of them, you will find that they will always say that the Prophet did this. That this man came to the Prophet, he asked him this, and the Prophet said this to him. And on many, many occasions, they do say, I have heard this from my father, who from his father, who from his father, and who saw the Prophet. And in fact, if you look at the Hadith of Ibn Abi Talib, you would say, Qala Rasulullah, Ra'it Rasulullah. There's always some type of a rooting into the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the thing, I think it's a sticky point here, but we are finding that there is some resolution and that the Shia themselves are not in agreement about the theological positions.
Just a
of the
brief,
Imams.
one sentence.
So,
only.
very briefly,
One
because
second.
the many other brothers.
I don't like to occupy all of
Okay.
it. This one question is, as Imam Malik said, everyone's version can be challenged, except Sahib Hazal Kabar, meaning Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that is not the right position of within courts, Wahhabi quotation. That is not the right position.
No.
Everyone's
I'm not
submission.
I'm not criticizing
You said
Wahhabi.
that they don't mention the chain.
No. That you misunderstood.
So because Imam Malik,
You misunderstood me. I'm saying that the Wahhabi brothers, when they have mentioned the hadith of Ali ibn Hussein, they have not even said from who.
but
They
it
have-
is in the books.
No, yeah, but I'm just saying they have revered him to that extent. When they have mentioned the hadith from Baqir, they have not said from who. They have revered him, but with this understanding that he has got his own chain from which he is talking from the Prophet. And I'm saying the Shia has the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
But I think crux of the matter, that whatever come from Aima, you don't challenge it. Whereas we, Ahlul Sunnah, whatever come from any Tabai or Tabata, we do challenge that. This is the crux of the matter. Am I right?
No, it's not
you're
correct.
not right.
Second, you see,
You're not
let me say,
Uh,
if anything comes from the Quran, do you challenge it?
No.
Rasulullah said, in our belief, this is in our belief. I'm not talking about your belief. I'm talking about إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعصرة ما إن تمسكتم بهما لن تضلوا. Okay? Then he described who is this Etra. Only those 12. Okay? Now,
No, he did not describe it well.
in our tradition, in our tradition,
Your
okay?
tradition,
In our tradition.
this is
But you-
something. This is
You
something.
quote
we can
hadith from
differ.
Imam Muslim,
Yeah.
and then
No, I'm
implement on
quoting
yours.
I'm quoting this from
Doctor, this is something.
I'm
So,
quoting
sorry,
this.
Chef. This is something, Dr. Saab. We can differ.
Yeah.
But we have to accept it. Otherwise,
No, I
we have to fight it or kill each other. That's the
I am talking.
The best way is that agree to disagree.
Yeah.
We
I'm
don't
not
agree.
talking
This
this,
is your.
I'm not talking this from Imam,
No.
Imam Muslim. I'm talking this from our sources. Okay.
You should mention.
He said, "Imam Qatar Kitab Allah wa Etra, Book of God, my Etra." And these, the Etra, the inspired members of his family, inspired members. Now, when anything comes from the Quran, we don't challenge. When anything comes from the Etra, we don't challenge. You cannot compare Imam Malik with Imam Rashid or Imam Jafar al-Sadiq.
Why not?
Imam Malik is a man of knowledge who takes his knowledge from roots of people to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq is an inspired member and
This is theoretical. This is your position.
This is what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
So Sheikh, Abu Jafar.
just to clarify.
Sheikh Abu Jafar, he just wait. And if you Sheikh, you can, give him chance, Sheikh.
I think.
Because this is your right.
Okay, I think the two shared speakers inshallah we receive it well.
And very briefly, because time is
For thought, but I
going.
think if the topic has been announced about a month ago, people should have done their homework, good research, and concerning Ahlul Bayt, I would like those who do not know Ahlul Bayt, they have to read Riyadh al-Salihin in the book of Imam Nawawi. He quote the hadith of Sayyid Muslim. He defined who are the Ahlul Bayt there. He defined, good definition. He said Alu Uqayl, Alu Abbas, and so on and so forth. He defined. And then he said Ahlul Bayt Nabi are those Hurrima alayhim sadaqah. He mentioned, defined them. So I don't know why there is kind of Also, I'm coming there. Also, if you want to know who is Imam Jafar Sadiq, you go and read the book of Imam Muhammad Abu Zahra. And you go and read Siyar al-Nubala al-Dhahabi.
It is Urdu translation as well available.
Dhahabi available.
Pakistani
Dhahabi, he mentioned clearly in volume 7, if I'm not wrong, about Imam Jafar Sadiq. When he spoke about Imam Jafar Sadiq, he said he doesn't need any Sunnah to say anything. Because Imam Jafar Sadiq, he called his father, who called his father as so on and so on until the Holy Prophet. The chain of our Imams goes to the Holy Prophet through their father. So we shouldn't say that there is no chain. We don't question what Imam have said because their chain going to Rasulullah first, but we question people who are in the Sanad sometimes. We question them. This is why there is Ilm al-Rijal, Ayatollah who he wrote a lot of books.
The classification of
other things. So it is clear. So the last point I wanted to make is that we believe the companions of Rasulullah when they quote something, but sometimes we have problem, like the hadith of Al-Ha'id in Sahih Bukhari. They say, Mubasharat al-Nisa and Al-Ha'id. The Shia ulama, they feel exposed with this when we say that Rasulullah used to do Mubashara Nisa wa inda al-Hayd. Because Quran says, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ.
You don't understand the meaning of Mubashara there in Arabic?
What is Mubashara?
Yeah, pick and choose.
He's an Arab.
Be tolerant. Listen.
He's an Arab.
Because in academic journals, you have to listen and
مباشرة النبي مباشرة الحائض. When you read this, you will see كان النبي يأمر النساء أن يعتذرن زار فيباشر. See, so we said that Rasulullah would never do this, and the chain there, even though it is termed as Sahih, we don't believe was ever chain.
From Sunni side, answer must be in the same way academically, with reference either from Muslim or At-Tirmizi in the same way. Okay, this is the hadith. Muslim says that, Muwatta says that, there is maybe a weakness in Bukhari. Is anyone is here to answer? This is not a you are wrong, no. Because this is not academic way. Academic answer should be, provided here.
What I understand from
Sorry to interrupt you. Sheikh, you can say here, जो hadith शेख अबू जाफर ने पेश की है बुखारी के, सॉरी बस आप जब ये इंग्लिश में कर रहे हैं तो अरबी के अल्फाज तो आप समझ गए हैं। तो उनके कहने का मकसद ये था कि बाज़ औक़ात हमें भी चैन के अंदर सनद के अंदर प्रॉब्लम होती है। बुखारी की हदीस ठीक है लेकिन उसमें बहुत सी हमारे सामने प्रॉब्लम, मसलन ये हदीस है तो इसके अंदर ये तासुर जाता है गोया कि तमाम अहले सुन्नत जो हैं वो इसके कायल हैं, क्योंकि बुखारी का बहुत बड़ा दर्जा है। तो ये तो अब इस पर आप क्या कहेंगे? किसी और मुहद्दिस ने, किसी और यानी इमाम मुस्लिम हैं, इमाम मालिक हैं या और मुस्तदरक हैं, उन्होंने इस पर कोई सी गुफ्तगू की है इमाम बुखारी के हवाले से? इस हदीस के बारे में आपकी नज़र से?
असल में दूसरे मुहद्दिसीन के मुतालिक तो इस वक्त मेरे ज़हन में मुस्तहज़र नहीं है, लेकिन एक मुश्तरक उसूल जो तमाम मुहद्दिसीन ने बयान किया है, उनके इमाम बुखारी रहमतुल्लाह के नज़दीक भी वो उसूल है और बाकी तमाम मुहद्दिसीन भी, कि ये जो चैन है हदीस के लिए जो सनद है, इसका नंबर कहीं तीसरे और चौथे नंबर पर भी आता है। सबसे पहला उसूल जो है वो ये है कि हदीस को कुरान पर पेश किया जाए। जो हदीस भी किताबुल्लाह के खिलाफ है, चाहे उसकी सनद कितनी आली क्यों ना हो, जो कुरान के कुल्लु हदीसिन युखालिफुहा ज़हरा किताबुल्लाह है फहुवा रद्द, जो किताबुल्लाह के खिलाफ है वो रद्द होगी। तो जो शेख ने हदीस मेंशन की है वो किताबुल्लाह के सरीह खिलाफ है। इसमें इमाम बुखारी की कोई तौहीन नहीं है, या इसमें ये बात नहीं है कि बुखारी गलत है। ये उसूल बुखारी पर भी अप्लाई होता है और हदीस की हर किताब पर अप्लाई होता है।
इस पर इस हवाले से आपके ज़हन में कुछ हुआ अस्मा और रिजाल में, या इमाम तिरमिज़ी, इमाम मुस्लिम ने कोई गुफ्तगू, या तशरीह में हाफिज़ इब्न हजर ने कोई?
इस वक्त मुस्तहज़र नहीं है लेकिन इसके ऊपर मौजूद है।
So I will take the opportunity to say a few more things as well. You see, Imam Bukhari,
Sheikh, please, first translation.
Thank you. Imam Bukhari, he gathered the ahadith, but he also observed the fundamental principle compare the hadith with the Quran. Now here, Sheikh is in agreement. Mubashara means sexual intercourse. The hadith is chain, despite being valid, it is inconsistent with the explicit text of the Quran, so it will not be accepted. The Shias face the same thing. On so many occasions, the chains of the hadith to the Imams of the Prophet are sahih, but they are in conflict with the Quran. The Prophet said, later on repeated by Ali ibn Abi Talib, until the sixth Imam was repeated, throw it away. I want to make another point, I want to come back. I respect the Wahhabi brothers, yes, I wasn't saying anything disrespectful, I'm saying that they were honoring the Imams. Now, I just want to say something, we find reconciliation here. That if it is acknowledged, and the Shia school of thought is a very diverse school of thought, it's not just one, yes? So if it is accepted that what Imam Sadiq says, he is from Bakr, he is from Ali, he is from Hussein, he is from Ali, he is from the Prophet, then in that case, we are talking about the same thing, that the chains are assured, yes? There might be a school of theological thought that says that when Imam Sadiq says something, he's inspired of the Sunnah. But there is also, if we look at jurisprudence, we will see this fixation that Imam Sadiq has said this, and they also said that Imam Sadiq said this, and this is what this was asked from the Prophet. Or they do say in theologically that whatever we say comes from the Prophet through these sort of chains. So if that's the case, then we are not finding a chain-less authority. We are finding an authority based on a chain that is meticulous. Dr. Khurram, did you get that? And
my mind is stick on the Mubashara because that is short of sexual intercourse.
Okay, that's fine.
That is really a blame on Imam Bukhari because what Imam Bukhari said is short of sexual intercourse.
فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ عِنْدَ الْمَهْدِ. What does it mean?
It means that you cannot have sexual intercourse.
Yeah,
No, that is a Jewish position who even don't eat from someone, a lady who got period, they don't even eat.
The ayah is
That Prophet
Yes, this is what you're saying, that there is a must be listen, because that's the academic answer. That's the academic answer.
Prophet asked Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha to comb his hair. Sorry, what you said?
No, I'm saying.
Okay. So she said, I got period. Prophet said, period is not even in her hands. So that means Mubashara does not mean sexual intercourse. So your allegation is utterly wrong.
No, they say, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ.
Yes, and same thing happened when Prophet ﷺ asked her to comb his hair, and she said, I got period. The Prophet said, it's not in your hands. Do it.
But
so, can I complete?
Sheikh, no, interruption is not allowed. Please listen.
What Imam Bukhari said that there was two extreme opinions. One is Jewish, one is Christian. In this case, Jewish that they even don't eat cooked food from. Sheikh Mahmood is nodding. I was just going to write to you. Just explain Mubashara. Here Mubashara is not nikah. Nikah is actual sexual intercourse. Mubashara is interaction. And Jewish opinion is that they don't even eat cooked by a lady who got period. On the other hand, Christian opinion is that they even have intercourse. So Islamic opinion is moderate, striking the balance. This is what Imam Bukhari has said. And you wrongly put it, and someone wrongly, help you and assist you on that.
So you can say wrongly. Let me clarify. No, Sheikh, this is to you and to you, Sheikh. This interpretation provided by Dr. Khurram, this is the Mubashara. And the literal meanings not necessarily should be taken always here. However, from the other side, Mufti Sahib, Sheikh Farooq Alavi, and he said something also. So what's the way? You can keep it in front of you. These are the opinions, not always necessarily. And the Shuruh Sharihin, the interpreter of Bukhari, because they also provide and they take the word Mubashara into its literal meaning, not necessarily. That's social interaction, meeting each other, not necessarily, and this is not inconsistent with وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ in the state of white. You may have different, you may have a lot of objections, but this is the stance from this side. You have to accept.
So he said what I did not mean that. We are talking about Quran, the word of Allah. Allah is specifically, when He speaks something, He knows what He speaks about. He speaks in a very pure Arabic language. The hadith say that mubasharat al-nisa, mubasharat al-hal, and then it continues to speak. Kana ya'mur nisa'ahu an ya'tazirna. So, means he used to command his wives to make izar, this portion from surah and rukhba.
Yeah.
Then fayubashiruhunna, yubashiruhunna.
Yeah.
Yubashiruhunna. He's an Arabian, that's not
This is a consensus among
So,
Ahlul Sunnah.
you listen to
ولا تباشرهن
Sheikh Farouk's, Sheikh Alawi Sahab, have you listened to the
So the
translation?
hadith is contrary to the book of Allah. Exactly.
Yes, sir.
I think Sheikh Mufti mentioned very clear. Mufti is with you.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, that's-
Said no.
So here, this is not debate,
I'm replying that
please.
he's not. He's
So
wrong.
we are not debating here, we trying to understand the other side.
It's not a debate. We speak about
Look at, Sir, Sheikh Abdul Hamid, who is from the speaker, is the best that's waiting for.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep the male way of talking and academic way of discussing the things. We know very well that people are from different background of Islam, theological background. But however, they can have their opinion, they can keep their own faith, but it is good to discuss. And if you want to disagree with somebody, it's important to use the right language to disagree as well, not hurting anybody else, and not arguing and again and again just crunching something which doesn't bring any result. So just have your opinion, say, and then go on. My question was that first of all, one of the clarification from my brother scholar, that we don't take from Ahlul Bayt. As I mentioned, we do take, and a good amount of Hadith and Sunnah we do take, and we have taken, which we find in our books. So that has been mentioned a couple of times here. This is not the case as it has been mentioned. I do disagree with that, and I clarify our position that from almost all of the, including Imam Jafar Sadiq, Imam Baqir, also before Imam Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma, and before, so we do take from all of them, but however, could be a little bit problem with the chain which has been mentioned here. The other question is that initially brother has mentioned the books were 6,600. Then out of those only 400 had been left, and then 16 were there. So that makes me to think honestly that is that then the Sunnah is incomplete. It's not complete shape as we have in Sunni background. From the day, as I have mentioned, at the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we had 48, then 250, and then after that we had even more than 3rd century. That was the prime time of the collection of Sunnah, when we had, big compilations, including Bukhari and Nasa'i, Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, and all of them. So it means that indicates to me that the Sunnah then it's incomplete. That more, or maybe a very small proportion is there, the rest has been destroyed or had been kept away or had been taken away somehow. So this is the one question. The second question is that in our tradition, it's quite common to take hadith from Ahlul Bayt as well as from the Sahaba, but proportionate wise, it's not the case with the Ahlul Bayt, with the Sahaba in Sunni tradition. The last question is that in Ahlul Bayt, sorry, I think in a bit I will say, I just forgot that very important question, but in a bit I will say if we can have these two answers first. Is that right?
Yes.
I think I could not explain myself very well about those books. You see, there were 6,600 books written, Out of them, 400 were reliable for everyone. So not all those 6,600 books, people said, okay, because this book is reported from Ja'far al-Sadiq or this book is reported from Ali ibn Abi Talib, we'll learn. Okay? There were 400 that they relied on them. So they became usul. They call it al-usul al-arba'a, the 400 principal books. Okay? Now those books were compiled in other books, of course. It was not only those 400. Those 400 were directly reported from A'immah, alayhimus salam. And then people started to compile from the 2nd century those traditions into their own books. Now, when I say those books are not available, it doesn't mean that the content is gone. The content were actually reported in other books. The very books themselves, only 16 of them are kept. I mean, you don't have the initial Quran, which was written at the time of Uthman alayhi salam, Uthman, the caliph. You don't have it. It's gone, but you have Quran copied into other books. Other nations have copied it. Also, other books which were sources for Al-Bukhari and Muslim, they may have been destroyed, but the book has actually contained. These books contain whatever was content of those books. When I say these books are lost, I mean those manuscripts of these 400 books. Only 16 of them you can find now. But it doesn't mean that their contents are not available. Their contents are available in books of Safar, Barqi, Kulaini, and many other books which were written written in the 2nd century, in the 3rd century, the 4th century, exactly the same way. I mean, Hadith was compiled in the Sunni. So I think this shouldn't be mistaken that because those books are gone, the content is gone as well. The content is there, it's reported in other books. What was the second question, sorry?
Second was related to the my third question, which I just remembered as well. The definition of inspiration of a tabi or taba tabi amongst the Shia A'immah Kiram, the family of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What is the meaning of inspiration without chain and accepting everything? Of course, if we say without literally asking the chain is there that I've heard from my father, then my father, then my father. So if that's there, then chain is there. However, if you ask or you don't. But if you simply say that there is no chain and we don't need it, there is different. And then I think I would be then a little bit hesitant to say that what is the difference between a Nabi, no Rasul, Nabi, and inspired family member of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Very good question.
So it's really important to differentiate between Nabi, because there is Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, La Nabiyya ba'di. So there is no Nabi after me. What is the then difference between Nabi and Imam? So it's quite important to understand that position.
Very good question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing this, because I had all these in my presentation, which we didn't have this time for it. You know, when we say inspired knowledge, it's like, for example, Mary in the Quran had inspired knowledge. That means she was not a prophetess, but she had some knowledge of the unseen. The angels communicated with her. Now, the position of the Imam in this Shia school, and this is the main difference, is that Imam is a muhaddath. Muhaddath is someone who's spoken to by God but is not a prophet, is one level lower than the prophet. And the knowledge of prophets may be somehow poured into his heart without needing to hear it from someone else. This is what we call al-ilmul ladunni, okay? So, just to clarify the Shia position here, because if you had not asked the question, I wouldn't have the chance to clarify this Shia position here. We believe that A'immah are from Siddiqeen. Just like Mary was a Siddiqah, and she had communication with the unseen. The A'immah are Siddiqeen, and a Siddiq has some position just in the realm of Muqarrabun, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ. So these are from Siddiqeen. and Siddiqin are muhaddathun. And this is what our Aimah have claimed again and again, that we are nahnu al-ulama al-muhaddathun. And muhaddath is someone to whom Allah speaks without being a prophet. And we have traditions I have mentioned here in Bukhari, in Muslim, that says that the Prophet said, in nations before you, there were people who were muhaddath without being a prophet. And if, now of course we disagree, I'm not mentioning that, and if there is someone in my ummah to be like that, is Umar ibn al-Khattab. This is what we have in Bukhari and Muslim.
Do you accept that?
No, of course I don't accept that. No, but I want to say that the concept is there. The concept of muhaddath, people being spoken to like Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran, who was spoken to without being a prophet. Now this is our belief. You may laugh at it, but this is what we believe in. Okay?
Okay, partly further to this clarification, thank you very much for that. Further to that is, how do you in Shia tradition, how do you establish that? From which hadith, from Quranic verse? It's okay to accept the hadith which Rasulullah said that تَرَكْتُ فِيكُمْ أَمْرَيْنِ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي. However, itrati is there, which we accept as well. The family of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, highly respected and highly admired and glorified in Ahlul Sunnah as well, no doubt in it. And if somebody doesn't respect the family of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then I don't think his iman is complete really. And then how do you establish the argument, the family of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or the certain people are inspired? How do you establish that? One thing. The second is that you just mentioned Hassan and Hussein, they are inspired. However, the third, their brother is not inspired. So how can you differentiate from the family? Some members are inspired, but however, some others are not inspired, but they belong to the same family as well.
Very good. Should I answer or
Yeah.
Should I answer or?
Just answer first, then we come into you.
I cannot thank you enough for bringing up these issues, because
These are the things which are related to the
Yeah,
topic.
I think these are the things we need to understand, we need to clarify.
We have to.
Come to the real topic.
Yes,
Yeah, that's why we believe that every Imam after the Prophet needs a nas. Nas means explicit citation. That you cannot know an Imam after the Prophet. You cannot just say, okay, people come together and choose someone. This is the main issue in Shia and Sunni, isn't it? That we say Ali ibn Abi Talib has a citation to be an Imam or nas, but Abu Bakr doesn't have a citation. And this continues. And we have many traditions in our books, of course not in the sources which are acceptable by you, that the Prophet has named every member of these inspired people, that these are the people who will come after me, and these are the 12 caliphs which are mentioned in Sunni sources, but of course it's very difficult to explain who these 12 caliphs is, and the Prophet said after me comes 12 caliphs. Now these 12 caliphs have nas, that is citation. That's why I said they're inspired members of family are not inspired members of family, and all of them are respectable. However, inspired members of family need citation from the Prophet. This is that Ahlul Bayt which, if ma in tamassaktum bihim lan tadillu. Okay, of course not every member of Prophet's family would have that situation. And therefore we say every Imam of these 12 should have a nas or citation from the previous Imam. That this is, because this is not something that people can realize and understand themselves. It's something which is beyond our spiritual capacity. So that should come from some other source which have that spiritual closeness to God, who can explain this. And this is the definition of etra for us. In the Hadith of Hajj, which is of course famous, we have it in both Shia and Sunni sources, when the verse was revealed, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ, the Prophet brought 4 people under her cloak, under his cloak, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein and Ali, and said, Allahumma ha'ulai ahlu bayti, means ahlu bayti who are inspired, not of course certainly the wives of the Prophet are from his Ahlul Bayt. Everyone knows wives of the Prophet are from his Ahlul Bayt. Son of Nuh is from his Ahlul Bayt. However, Allah says, so you see, the point is, we are now coming to the core of Shia belief about Nas citation, why the Prophet had to appoint someone after himself. It was not just a political caliph, it was that Imam which had the inspired knowledge of the Sunnah of the Prophet and interpretation of the Quran.
Yes, so we're coming to Dr. Khurram Zulfikar, his number is there, then Dr. Sheikh Mahmoud.
You know, the real...
Yes, Zulfikar, yes, we're coming to you now.
I am
Dr. Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Jazakumullah khairan for both speakers again, alhamdulillah. My question is directed towards Sheikh Abdul Hamid. In regards to the concept of Sunnah, the prophetic Sunnah, to Ahlul Sunnah basically. So, you know, in Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we have many different understandings, and there's groups as well, you know, Deoband, Barelvi, Wahhabi, whatever, and so on and so forth, Ahl Hadith. But what I would like to understand is how can we understand the prophetic way, you know, given the Hadiths and given the Quran evidences as well, because there seems to be a lot of confusion in the modern day and age to the general public, to the general Muslims, about this whole issue. You know, how can we define ourselves as Ahlul Sunnah or whether we are not of Ahlul Sunnah? Because then they categorize themselves as many different people. But obviously, we all believe at the end of the day that, you know, we are Sunnis, Muslims. So how you know, according to the prophetic way, how can we go about this with the evidences that we have from the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
I think in terms of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah nowadays, the groups we have, this is the very distorted way of being Sunni nowadays as well, just like Barelvi and Deobandi. But however, this all is the creation of this century or the last century really. Before that, we don't find these groups as such. There was only Ahlul Sunnah as such one group, and Ahlul Shia another group. But however, having said, still all of those groups are still considered Ahlul Sunnah. Then those are further say the grouping and understanding of being Barelvi, they are Ahlul Sunnah, and Deobandi Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Hadith Ahlul Sunnah. They all will still be classified Ahlul Sunnah, all of them together.
So you see the issue
इसमें यह है कि देवबंदी अहले हदीस बरेलवी जो भी है, जैसे उन्होंने कहा भी बने हैं, हम जब अहले सुन्ना का मसलक ढूंढेंगे कि इस मसले के ऊपर अहले सुन्नत की राय क्या है, तो वो हम इन ग्रुप से नहीं लेंगे, बल्कि जो अहले सुन्नत के बेसिक मुनाबिक़ हैं, जो असल माखिज़ हैं, हम उनकी तरफ रुजू करेंगे। जो कुछ हमें वहाँ से मिलेगा वो अहले सुन्नत का मसलक है। जो आजकल के ग्रुप्स का मसलक बन गया है वो अहले सुन्नत की तर्जुमानी नहीं है।
So very briefly, Sheikh said, however, there are so many different groups and the sects within Ahlul Sunnah under this heading. But in terms of finding out what's the proper stance and viewpoint of Ahlul Sunnah, we cannot take from these different groups. Generally, we have to go back to the basic sources of Ahlul Sunnah. And then talking about, this is clarification, sometimes we say Wahhabis, when you are in the Middle East, this is for the brothers, especially our Shia brothers, when you are in the Middle East, no problem. When you are in the subcontinent, there is a problem, because the word Wahhabi is used very negatively against a certain people. Negatively, it means to them they are the insulters of the Holy Prophet. To my understanding, Wahhab is one of the names of God Almighty. To use the word Wahhabi as a taunting, this is completely unlawful, because indirectly you insulting the name of Wahhab. But there is. So the best name is Ahlul Hadith. Ahlul Hadith instead of using Wahhabis or Salafis. Ahlul Hadith. Secondly, That's finally, because the hospitality is waiting, I'm receiving the indications. Yes, Sheikh Mahmood, then finally Dr. Khurram Bashir, then we have to conclude it. Okay, very
If
briefly.
you don't mind, keep me to the end, please, because I have very short speech, and if you don't mind, please.
Because they are waiting there. MashaAllah, that's very great. Then Dr. Khurram
I
Sahib,
just
briefly.
like to highlight that I have a little booklet, it says Al-Hukuma Al-Islamiyya, and I try to go through it. And the logic given about Aima al-Muslimin, that there is no wahi nowadays. If a prophet makes a mistake, wahi can correct. However, because there is no wahi, so Aima do not make mistake altogether. If I am not quoting right, the Arabic version I got with me. So that means Aima, Masumi are more than prophet. The net result is this, that a prophet can make mistake and
No,
can
we don't
be.
believe
Can
prophet
I
can make
complete?
mistake.
Can I complete?
Yes, it's a
Yes.
come on, let
Can I get 1 minute?
You know, the argument is based on this. We now have a new muhaddas about muhaddas as well, and we can talk about it. There's no time.
No question for you. Yes, sir. Yes.
So the argument is given in Al-Hukuma Islamiyya. I
No,
know
the whole
everyone.
issue is wrong because we don't believe prophets can make mistakes.
No,
we don't believe that.
This is Al-Hukuma Islamiyya by Imam Khomeini, rahimahullah.
What did he say? What did he say?
Yeah, but he says that Aima, because there is no wahi.
Sir,
The logic is there.
let me come in, Dr. Saad. So we have to conclude it. We have to conclude.
No, shall I just make a comment?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
whatever doctor is saying is right. Yes, these are the debates that need to be had.
Mm.
Yes, Shia Mufassirin are saying the Prophet did make a mistake in adjudication.
Yeah.
The Wahi came and put him right.
Yeah.
By implication, if the Imams say something and they can't be challenged, then they are above the Prophet.
That's it.
It's a logical thing. You see, the thing is, you have to understand also that when you say the Shia position, what is a Shia position? Just as Mufti Sahib said, go back to the original sources. Yes, that would clarify the Shia positions. In Al-Hukum al-Islamiyya, Imam Khomeini is giving his views. Yes. Now, Sheikh said that the Prophet said that the 12 Imams after Miyadis. You will find that there are a host of Shia ulama who say that the Prophet did not say that. Yes, but the sanad of the subsequent Imam came from the preceding Imam. Nobody knew who the subsequent Imam was going to be. Yes, so when we say the Shia position, we also have to similarly be open enough to say, look, as Mufti Sahib said, we have to go back to their sources to say, well, what are their sources saying? So I'm just saying that debate, rather than it becoming a polemical argument between me and you and him and her, for the sake of Allah and Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let us be very broad-hearted, genuine, and try and see the goodness and try and converge. Yes, thank you.
I have the question for the gather, just a small question. Yes, if Allah, He said there is no revelation after the
Can we give
Quran,
that?
which means there is no book after Quran, that we believe all of us. But He used the word there is no wahi. So that to say that Allah doesn't speak anymore according to Him.
No,
Not according to me,
meaning
according to Hukuma Islamiyya.
Not to Him, because He said there is no wahi.
No, I think
No,
the
not
qualification
according to me,
is
according
Wahi is
to
Quran.
Khomeini.
So you
Wahi
believe
be
there is
back to
wahi
Quran.
after the Prophet?
Is
You
this-
believe that there is wahi after the Prophet?
No one believes.
Okay, this one He doesn't speak. Allah doesn't
You
speak
don't
to
believe
Him, right? So Allah He said, "Kulla yawmin huwa fi sha'n." What do we believe at a sentence? Kulla yawmin huwa fi sha'n.
No, I think the
Does he not talk
I think the argument was a bit different.
Yeah.
I think the argument was a bit different. And we don't need to go and pick at each other.
Yes.
Go to the core and try to see if the Shias have a problem, the Shias have to look inside and say we have a problem.
Yes.
If the Sunni have a problem, the Sunni have to look inside and say you're not going to be raised with Ibn Taymiyyah, I'm not going to be raised with Imam Khomeini.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be raised with my God and my Prophet. I have to be opening up.
Yes.
The Muslims are killing each other because of this.
Yes.
You said this, I said this, Mubashara. What difference does it make what Mubashara means? Let's go back to the core. Sorry about that.
And sorry, doctor. This is the point I was trying to say from early on. That, for example, Hadith, Kitab Allah wa Itrati, Kitab Allah wa Sunnati, today divides the Ummah.
Yeah.
Why? Because if a Sunni, for example, some of my friends, they quote this Hadith, they are told you are Shias. If a Shia would quote, for example, Kitab Allahi wa Sunnati, he is known as a Sunni. So this gathering is the place to discuss these kind of things, wholeheartedly, with sincerity.
Yes, you are
No.
right, Shaykh. And that's why we decided the concept of Ahlul Bayt should be discussed thoroughly. However, some of the parts have been discussed today, but very partly. This is not enough for the proper and the genuine understanding. For example, you beautifully explained, Shaykh, the inspiration in the terms of the knowledge. Because there are two categories. This is a good interpretation and the information to our Sunni brothers. There are two categories of Ahlul Bayt. So generally Ahlul Bayt never excluded. There's a darajat, right? Then it needs the thorough discussion, the properly from the Sunni side as well, because still there are misunderstandings. Secondly, before we have to conclude, I'm sorry, Sheikh Mahmoud, because they are restless. So I give you the chance, just very brief. Secondly, this is the ilmi manhaj. Academically, even if I don't agree with you, this is your view, I don't agree with you according to our way. This case is, the position of this case is this, according to our hadith or the original sources. This is the only way we are here and we have to understand each other. It doesn't mean that we have to make agree the other side or defeat the other side. This is not possible because in the 1400 years, a lot of wars and the fight and still going on. So this meeting, this majlis is actually to solve the problem by understanding each other, by retaining your differences. Because the understanding may be established on the foundation of the differences and ikhtilafat as well. And this is the only way forward. There is no any other way except calamity and bloodshed. So, Sheikh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا الصادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In the beginning, I'm very happy to talk in this time. Very shortly.
Will you say something in Arabic?
Yeah, I will mention something in Arabic.
You've got a
Yes, because time is already up. So it's a very short in English. English is best.
Yes.
And then
Yes. We are meeting with each other today, talking about the resources for Sunnah, from where we can learn Sunnah and practicing Sunnah. Anyway, to shortcut a lot of speech, we believe in Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Wallahu mutimmu nurihi walau kariha al-kafirun." So no worry about Quran and about Sunnah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that He will save it. So we shouldn't worry, even if we have different, and I agree with some of opinions and I disagree with some of opinions, and this is not my speech now. Anyway, the number one is Allah will save Quran and Allah will save Sunnah of His Messenger, which is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Number two, and this is very, very most important, and it's really makes me very, very, very sad. Nowadays, we have a lot of problems in many countries of Muslims countries, and we should be as a one hand, as one unit, and let's go and working together, which we are agree already. And if there is any difference, leave it at moment. At least we shouldn't fight each other as happening nowadays. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا لَسْتَ مِنْهُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ. شِيَعًا means here is not Shia. Shia means groups. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا groups. لَسْتَ مِنْهُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُمْ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُنَبِّئُهُمُ اللَّهُ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. And He has said, مِنَ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيعًا كُلُّ حِزْبٍ. Every or each group, they are happy with what they have. كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم. And he has said وأطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تنازعوا فتفشلوا وتذهب ريحكم واصبروا إن الله مع الصابرين. The last thing is, last scholars and last ulama, whoever they are, they have make ijtihad. Some, if they make something good, Allah will reward them double, and if they did something wrong, Allah will reward them because they was trying to find the right way.
MashaAllah.
So we shouldn't.
ختامه مسك.
So we shouldn't fight or blame or make any problems with any of ulama, because all of them they was trying to do their best to mention Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have try and do our best as they did before, and try to meet each other, and we should be as a one hand, as a one unit, and we should love each other, and we should teach the people and Muslims the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is al-tasamuh and al-rahmah and al-af and a lot of akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the main thing that we miss it nowadays, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said in the beginning of Risala, إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يجعلنا من يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه، أولئك الذين هداهم الله وأولئك هم الألباب. اللهم حسن أخلاقنا واهدنا لأحسن الأخلاق لا يهدي لأحسنها إلا أنت، واصرف اللهم عنا سيئها لا يصرف عنا سيئها إلا أنت. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا ووفقنا إلى اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا ووفقنا إلى اجتنابه. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نسألك الرشاد في الأمر كله يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم أعنا على اتباع سنة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، واحشرنا في زمرته صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اسقنا من يده الشريفة شربة هنيئة لا نظمأ بعدها أبدا. اللهم اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان، ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا. ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد المختار وعلى آله وأصحابه الغر الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا، وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.